This June 22, 2001, EAH meeting with the late Dr. John Craven was prepared from the restored micro-cassette tape recording. Dr. Craven's Navy career started in World War II. He rejoined the Navy supervising the Polaris Missile program and later the chief scientist for the Navy's Special Projects Office on Deep Ocean Sustainable Habitats, Sea Lab 2 and 3, and the Navy's secret developments for saturation diving. He shared his insight on two stories on covert Cold War intrigue. First, on the CIA Glomar Explorer's attempt to recover the rogue Russian submarine K-129, which sank in 1968 northwest of Hawaii. The second was on recovery of the black boxes for the KAL-747 shot down in 1983 in the Sea of Japan by the Russian Air Force. After retiring from the Navy, Craven relocated to Hawaii to head the marine programs at the University of Hawaii, and he helped establish Hawaii's Natural Energy Laboratory on Hawaii Island. He concluded his talk with his continuing work on ocean sustainable habitats, floating cities, ocean thermal energy technology, and enhancing agriculture growth using cold, deep ocean water.
Well, I tell you what, we have a terrific program today, and I am going to turn it over to Lee here. He's going to introduce our speaker and tell us maybe what we've got planned for next week's program as well.
We're real happy to have John Craven back with us. 2 years ago, if you were here, he came and he spoke about a book that has talked a lot about him, and he told me at that time, he said that didn't even get into the half of it. I'm going to write my own book, and I asked him, well, when you do, would you come back and tell us about it? He's finished the book. It's out. It's selling very well. He received his bachelor's degree from Cornell University and went on to complete a master's at Caltech, received a doctorate from the University of Iowa, and while he was working for a Navy model base and laboratory at night for fun, he went and finished his law degree at George Washington University. He was one of a group of people at the David Taylor model base. He'll probably tell us about his work on the Nautilus. He went on to become chief scientist for the Navy Special Projects Group. From there, he went to be the head of the deep submergence programs. His work brought him to Hawaii on several occasions and brought him to the attention of then Governor John Burns, who asked him to move to Hawaii to become head of the Marine Affairs and also to become Dean of Marine Programs, University of Hawaii. And if that wasn't enough, later he founded the Natural Energy Lab, which continues today, and he has also recently started his own company or his own foundation, the Common Heritage Corporation, which I'm sure at the end of his talk he's going to tell us a little bit about. So please join me in welcoming Dr. John Craven.
I always like to talk to this group. This is the only group I would talk to in which there are guys that are older than I am, okay? Right now, my life is very interesting in terms of people bringing up the past, bringing up the modern past, and the present and the future. And so you've seen me on television, and people call me up on programs, and they say, the Discovery Channel, we want to do a program about you. And I say, fine. What do you want to do it about? And they say, well, we want to do it about submarines. Okay, submarines, okay. And they call up, what do we want to do about? We want to do it about your strawberries. Okay, strawberries, okay. And the other day they called me up, and they talked about all these things, and I said, don't want to do anything about that. What do you want to talk about? They said, floating cities, okay. Well, we haven't even talked about the floating cities. All right. So how do we put this all together the way engineers can understand it? And that is, I now have a company called Common Heritage Corporation. It is not a foundation. It's a profit-making corporation. Haven't made any profits yet, but it is a profit-making corporation. I want you to understand that, okay? And the way it doesn't sink into the bankruptcy is that it works actively in projects which are using deep ocean water for environmentally sustainable habitats, and I'll say a little bit about that, okay? And we haven't sold one of those habitats yet. We're pretty close, very, very close. But in order to make money, we do consulting. And we do consulting on the subjects that I worked on in the past, okay? And so in order to get across to people what the spectrum of what our company is concerned with, we have come up with a T-shirt with a logo. Okay? All right. By the way, we are making lots of money selling these T-shirts. All right? And if you want to give little children presents, you get the T-shirt. Okay. Now, here you have a yin-yang logo. And what is our company concerned with, and has been concerned with all along? We've been concerned with environmentally sustainable habitats that are being used for one purpose or another. As I've gone through life, the first environmentally sustainable habitat I lived on was a battleship, okay? And that was a floating city if there ever was one, okay? But the purpose of that battleship was to win World War II. And then I got involved with nuclear submarines. And if there ever was an environmentally sustainable habitat, it's the nuclear submarine that goes to sea for 2, 3, or 4 months at a time and then comes back. But we were in there in order to deter nuclear war, okay? And then, as we moved on from that, we moved into sea labs, which are environmentally sustainable habitats for people engaged in saturation diving. Now, the interesting thing, which we put on this book, is that up until 1970, everybody thought that the Navy was engaged in saturation diving as an interesting experiment for the future. And I was in charge of the Sea Lab 3 project. And in the Sea Lab 3 project, we had a disaster, and a young man named Barry Cannon lost his life. And it probably was through no fault of our own, but at that point, the Navy had its quarter inquiry, just like they had here with this submarine. At the end of that quarter inquiry, what did they do with all the naval officers that were involved with the project? They gave them letters of reprimand, okay? And they retired from the Navy. But what most people did not know was that we used this as an excuse to announce that the Navy was getting out of saturation diving. But instead of getting out of saturation diving, we moved into saturation diving completely secretly. And one of those guys, Commander Jack Tomsky, was called back into the Navy. One guy received letter of reprimand. He was called back to the Navy at a time that the only guy who'd been called back, there were 5 people called back, 4 admirals, and 1 Mustang commander who was a letter of reprimand. And they called him back to start a secret school, which we still don't tell you where it is today, in order to train saturation divers. And the net result of that was we have SEAL teams, which I can't tell you what submarines they're on or whether they put me in jail, okay, that exist today. But in the book, we do talk about the first successful SEAL team. Now, I'll just say a word about intelligent submarines. And the reason that we know about these intelligent submarines is because we had American traders who revealed this. That's right, and they hadn't revealed it. We might be so highly today this particular environmentally sustainable habitat. Here it is right here, okay? So, let me briefly say what happened. Is after we finished while we were doing the Deep Submergence program, we asked the question as to whether or not the technology could be used for intelligence purposes. And we decided that it could, and so in complete secret, we took a submarine called Halibut. Now, we modified it with all sorts of stuff which we can't talk about today in order to go out and look for things in the ocean. And we didn't expect to find the most sensational thing that we found, which was a Russian submarine that was what we call a rover. That was a Russian submarine that was located where it should not have been located, and where the Kremlin did not know it was located, and where that submarine was engaged in activity that even today we're not sure what it was, but could have been very, very hostile. As I say in the book, one possibility is that it was going to fire a missile at Hawaii, all right, okay? So after we found the submarine, and we found as much as you can find out without actually lifting the submarine or bringing it back, we came back, and the first person that we notified was the president, and that was Lyndon Johnson at that time. At that time, Lyndon Johnson did not want to hear anything because he was about to leave the presidency, okay? So, but as soon as Nixon came in, or I should say, as soon as Kissinger became president, okay? They they got very excited. And then everybody is very, very happy, and but they're not completely happy because they want to find out more, okay? And someone says, we've got to find out more. And at that time, we say, we have developed a technique called saturation diving. We're about to put this saturation diving on a submarine called Seawolf. And if we put it on Seawolf, it can go out and it can tap the Soviet cable going from Moscow to Vladivostok. And if it taps the Soviet cable going from Moscow to Vladivostok, what can it hear? You hear the Russians debating and arguing back and forth themselves as to, hey, what the hell's going on over here? Okay, what's really going on? And when we get crisis discussions like that, they lose all sense of security and things like that, and they just blab out this as much as they can. Well, it turns out that the Seawolf wasn't going to be ready to go with saturation divers, and then at that point, we suddenly realized that we could take the Sealab technology, put it right back on the back of the Halibut, the one that had done the first thing, and send that right out to sea. Right? And we sent that Halibut right out to sea, and it came back having tapped the Soviet cable, all right, and getting some information which we can't tell you about, but you can only speculate about. Okay? And now, at this point, we have started having more conversations with the Russians, in which we're saying, hey, Russians, you've lost command and control, and you better get it straight, and you better start negotiating with us on some arms control agreement. And the Russians say, no, that's nonsense, okay? Now, at that time, and by the way, this part of my talk has no connection to the rest of my talk at all. And any speculation you get from this talk, you will have to repeat, or if you do repeat it, you didn't get it here, okay? About that time, a book comes out called Hunt for the Red October, okay? And that's a very interesting book, because it's a book about rogue Russian submarines. And it tells you that the United States can handle all rogue Russian submarines without any trouble at all, okay? And so everyone who reads the Hunt for the Red October or sees the picture goes away feeling, hey, we can handle rogue submarines extremely well, okay? Now, that would be good propaganda, wouldn't it? In case the public had found out that there was a rogue submarine that was launching a missile against Hawaii. Is that right? Okay? And so, if it was good propaganda, perhaps the book was not written by Tom Clancy. But we would just put that down as minor speculation, okay? But I want to give you a feeling about time frame. Because what really happens, however, is that the Russians keep coming back and saying, hey, you guys are smoking opium or pot or whatever it is that they have here. We say, no, we're not. And we tell them, hey, you know what? What we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to build a ship. And we're going to go out and we're going to lift that submarine up and show the whole world what it was doing. Right? And so they start to organize the Glomar Explorer. And they do it in complete secrecy from everybody excepting who? The Russians. Excepting the Russians, okay? And do we know that the Russians are going to be observing every single aspect of it? Of course they do. I was on the Defense Agency Scientific Advisory Board, and we had satellites, and if Russia built a junior high school, and we didn't know what it was, we'd get around the table and would say, what's that building there? And we'd examine it in great detail until we finally found out that it really was a junior high school, okay? They're doing exactly the same thing, okay? Right now they'd be excited when they look at Punahou, okay? Because Punahou is having the Taj Mahal built there, isn't that right? They are. They are. And the Russians would say, why does a lowly school like Punahou have a Taj Mahal built as though it were being built by the wealthiest man in America, right? Okay?
Well, the second wealthiest man.
Is the second wealthiest man in the world?
No, it isn't Gates, though.
Oh, yeah.
He's the wealthiest.
Oh, Gates is the wealthiest?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think so. I think Gates' stock has dropped, okay? anyhow, that's a kind of a diversion from the talk, but it's just relevant. Okay, so the Soviets watch this, and then when you go and look at the deployments of the Glomar Explorer, you'll discover that every time that the crisis starts to heat up, the Glomar Explorer gets further and further out to sea, all right, okay, and closer to picking up the submarine. And then, finally, there comes a day when the Glomar Explorer attempts to pick up the submarine, right? Ha, ha, ha. And is it successful? No. And so, therefore, do we ever expose what the Soviets were doing with our submarine? No, okay? But this occurs at a time when what war is about to be over? The Cold War. All right, the Cold War, okay? And at that point, there's no need, not is there no need, but it's probably a good idea for a secret negotiation between the Russians and ourselves to come up with a story about that Russian submarine and a story about why the CIA couldn't recover it, okay? And to leak the information from the CIA. Oh, the CIA would never do that. The CIA would never do that, okay? All right, okay. Well, the rumor is that Mr. Seymour Hersh, the guy Seymour Hersh, that the director of CIA called up Mr. Seymour Hersh and said, "Hey, Seymour, how come you found out about our ship?" And Seymour said, "Found out about your ship? What did I find out about your ship?" "How come you found out that our ship is out there trying to recover a Russian submarine?" And Seymour said, "Did I find that out?" Okay. And the guy said, "Yes." And Seymour said, "Well, I'm going to publish it tomorrow." And the guy said, "Well, you better not publish it unless you publish what you found out, and we will tell you what you found out." Okay. And how do I know that? Because I had an interview with Seymour Hersh, okay? And that's what he told me, all right? He said, "I got off the director of CIA, see?" And I said, "Well, maybe the director of CIA did not give you the right story." "Oh, he's an honest man and straightforward, and of course he gave me the right story, not the story he once told." What happened after that point was the Navy intelligence system was devoted toward a new kind of intelligence, and that's finding out before Moscow knew it what the coups were going to form against it. Okay, let's take a couple of instances that we think about. One is the shooting down of the KAL. Okay, the question is, was the KAL shot down on orders from Moscow? Was it shot down deliberately against orders from Moscow? Or was it shot down because the local guys just did it? Okay, all right? And so that became our big intelligence activity, all right? And I recount a little personal incident in here that my publisher just plays down as compared to where I thought it should be, okay? It goes as follows. The CIA came to say, but by this time, I'm no longer involved in naval intelligence because I'm now a professor at the University of Hawaii. And I'm a director of the Wallace Institute, okay? And the Wallace Institute doesn't get itself involved with this kind of stuff, okay? All right? So, but anyhow, on occasion, the CIA would call me up, okay? And the CIA called me up and they said, "Hey, Craven, you're going to a technology conference in London, and when you get there, Mr. Salvage, the Russian small submarine guy, is going to be present. Okay? Oh, would you find out what he knows about the KAL site recorder?" And I said, "KAL site recorder?" I said, "Don't you guys have the KAL site recorder?" And they said, "Oh, yes, we do. But if we did, we'd have to say we didn't have it. If we didn't have it, we would say that we didn't have it, okay?" And so we can't tell you whether we have it or we don't have it. But of course we have it, but we can't say that we have it. So we want you to find out from Mr. Salvage whether the Russians know anything about the KAL site recorder, okay? Now, of course, what they're saying is that if Kremlin recovered the KAL site recorder, Mr. Salvage would recover it, okay? And so the question is, that since I knew Salvage from other occasions, could I take him out and feed him enough vodka and things of this kind to get some indication as to where he was? So I sort of agreed on that, and I went to London for this. My time's well. I'll finish this. Okay, all right. And so I went to London, and I had a big suitcase, and I had a small valise. Okay, and I had to change planes in New York, and I could go from United to Pan Am. So I arrived in London, and I'm standing there with my briefcase, and I put it in a wagon, and the baggage arrives from New York, and my suitcase is not in the baggage. Okay, so that's not unusual. I figured that's it. And so I decided I'll go and report that my baggage hasn't come yet. As I do that, I turn around to look for my briefcase, and guess what? Gone. Good for you, okay? It's good. You get A for this. It's gone, see? So I go to Pan Am and I say, hey, I don't have my briefcase, suitcase, but my briefcase is gone, see? And the Pan Am guy says, well, this section of Heathrow is under the control of British Air. So don't see us, go see the head of the local British Air. So I go to the head of the local British Air, and he's very nasty. He says, well, it says probably someone took about a mistake, and you'll find it at customs or something like that. Don't worry about it. Pay no attention to it whatsoever. And I said, what do you mean don't worry about it? I said, I'm worried about it. So we get the cops, and we go and visit all the stations around the place, and we can't find the briefcase. Now, by this time, another Pan Am flight arrives. And when that Pan Am flight arrives, there is my suitcase, okay? So I take the suitcase, and I go over to Pan Am, and I tell him, I've got my suitcase now, I don't have the briefcase. And the guy says, where is your suitcase? And I turn around, and guess what? Gone. Now, and there's this great big lie behind me. Now the suitcase is gone, and the briefcase is gone, all right, okay? So at this point, I go back to see this British Air guy, and he says, if I were you, Dr. Craven, I'd get out of this airport as fast as possible. and pay no attention. I said, what do you mean get out as fast as possible? I said, we're going to find both these briefcases, both these suitcases, a suitcase. And so we hung around, and all of a sudden, he comes out of the back, and he's got the suitcase. And not the big bag, but the little bag. He's got the bag. He says, we just found this. And I said, where'd you find it? And he said, and this is a true statement, he said, a little old lady had picked it up by mistake and was trying to check it in at the airport, and we realized that it was not it, see? And I said, oh, that's an interesting story. I said, well, very good. And he gave me the suitcase. I said, wait a minute. I said, that suitcase has been out of my possession for a long period of time, and here we are at Heathrow, and what happens to suitcases that are out of your possession for a long period of time? You're worried about the IRA, right? And you're worried about bombs and things of this kind, see? And so I said, I'm not going to look at that suitcase unless it goes through a inspection first, okay? And by this time, the bobbies have arrived, and they're all circling around. And one of the policemen said, oh, what are you worried about, Dr. Craven? And he picks the suitcase up, and he says, look, there's nothing in it. And he opens it up, and sure enough, there's nothing in it, okay? I mean, there's no bomb inside. How did he know that, see? And at this point, I knew that I lost my cool, because what I should have said, the tapes, where are the tapes, okay? I didn't think about that. Anyhow, so now I've got my briefcase, and now I go to my hotel, and now I actually visit my daughter up in Cambridge, come back to the hotel. On Monday I get a call from a hotel in the outskirts of town, and says, Dr. Craven, we have your suitcase out of our place, and if you'll come out and get it. And I went out there, and I said, where did it come from and how did it get here? And they said, we don't know. We have no idea how it got here. And I called up the cops, and they said, we don't know anything about your suitcase. And I called up Pan Am, and they said, we don't know anything about your suitcase. And I called everybody else, all right? Now, the obvious answer is that this is British intelligence. I mean, they want to know about the KAL, okay, all right? And when they want to know about the KAL, they're going to look for Salvage, okay? And if they're going to look for Salvage, who else are they going to look for? Me, okay, right, okay? And they figure I'm going to have something in my briefcase that tells them one way or the other about the whole thing, okay? But it's amazing the number of people who say, come on, Craven, you're just imagining things. This just was a strange coincidence. A strange coincidence, but not a strange coincidence about the way I lost all those briefcases and things of that kind. No. When you're in this business, you know what a strange coincidence is and what a strange coincidence is not. Now, what finally happened, I got to the conference and Salvage was not there, all right? And the reason that Salvage was not there was that, why was he not there? Because he was sick or ill, or why was he not there? You got it. He was told, you're not going to be there, Salvage, all right, you see. And, yeah.
You mentioned the Red October.
Yeah.
That is completely fictional, but it supposedly was a major threat to the U.S. because it had a bullshit system that was silent, which I remember correctly from the movie, it squeezed the water rather than churned it.
Oh, yeah, well, first, I've never read The Hunt for the Red October, and I will not read it, and I haven't seen the film, and the reason I don't is because I don't want to get confused with fiction with reality, okay, all right? So let me talk about the Hunt for the Red October and this book. When I wrote this book, I did no research for it. I did everything from my own recollection, okay? And as I did the recollections, I kept saying to myself, hey, you know, is this a real recollection or is this a figment of my imagination, right? Now, the one thing that I knew I carried to the grave with me was the position of the Russian submarine, 180-40. That's how we even knew that it was a Russian submarine, because we got this little blip at exactly 180-40. And 180-40 is not a constant of nature. It is a figure that only human beings recognize, 180-40. And that's the only reason we even looked for it, was because we had lots of blips like that all over the ocean. But we knew that a Russian submarine was lost, that they were all hunting for it, and we also knew that 180-40 was 300 miles away from where the submarine was supposed to be. A lot of guys didn't even want us to go look at it. It says he was smoking opium. So when we got 180-40, I said to myself, that number is burned in my brain and will be there forever, okay? And I will never reveal, and I'll go to my grave and never reveal it. Well, somebody else revealed it, okay? And when somebody else revealed it, and they revealed it as 180-40, what did I tell myself? Yeah, Craven, your memory is right, 180-40, okay? Now, there was another thing that was burned in my brain, which was the call letters of the Russian submarine, okay? And what was not burned in my brain was K-129, all right? That was not what was burned in my brain, K-129. I won't tell you what was burned in my brain, excepting that, as I recall it, we called our hunt the Hunt for the Red September. Before the book, The Hunt for the Red October, was printed. Okay? And now, I'm waiting for someone from the CIA who was there involved and something like that to confirm what was called the Hunt for the Red September. I could be confused because there is a Russian November class that had sunk, but we didn't call the Hunt for the Red November. You see what the problem is on this whole thing, and so I said, well, maybe it's just a figment of my imagination after I saw the word. But I do remember that the day I saw it was all the word the Hunt for the Red October, a kind of shock went through my body, right? Wouldn't that happen to you? If you suddenly look for this book and you recall the Hunt for the Red September as a secret thing that you didn't talk about, and here's a book coming out with the Hunt for the Red October. Oh my, what a connection. So therefore, I got involved in my life in deterrence of nuclear war and solving the other war. And then I came to Hawaii, and I asked myself, what is the next major problem for the world? The next major problem for the world is the population explosion and migration to the coastal zone. Okay? And therefore, how are we going to help on that problem? And the way we're going to help on that problem is by developing environmentally sustainable habitats, which operate strictly on the resources of the ocean, and the deep ocean water and things of that kind. And so we consult on sea labs, we consult on submarines, we consult on everything like that. But what we actually have is a facility where we produce golf course turf with deep ocean water, where we do fresh water made from deep ocean water, where we do air conditioning, industrial cooling with deep ocean water, where we do cold water agriculture. We've just demonstrated our ability to grow grapes on a grapevine and produce 3 crops of grapes per year. And what we do is we pass cold water through pipes in the ground at the root level. So for grapes, we pass it at 3-foot depth. And that produces condensate on the pipes, which is enough water for the grapes, but it produces another phenomenon which the plant physiologists still don't understand, and that's thermodynamics, that the difference in temperature between the root and the fruit determines the rate at which nutrients are fed up into the plant. So our plants grow very, very fast, and we can grow plants from anywhere. So on our grapevines, what we do is we put this cold water down with the roots, and then we let the grapes grow, and they become ripe, and we harvest them. As soon as we harvest them, we turn the cold water off, make the grapes grow dormant. We let them stay dormant for 3 weeks, and we turn the cold water back on again. And we turn the cold water back on again. 100 days later, we have a gigantic crop of grapes. And I'm sorry, as a matter of fact, we're about to harvest a crop of grapes over there today, and the guy who runs the facility said, hey, why don't you take a big bunch of grapes over and show these guys? And I said, what? We want to save these. We want to make wine out of them. We want every bit of wine we can possibly get. And we don't have too much. The answer is that Common Heritage Corporation and my life and things of this kind have been involved in deep water, ocean water, sustainable habitats as the general kind of thing, and that's what engineers are interested in. And sometime we can give a lecture of the details of what it is that makes the habitat sustainable and how you do it as an engineer, okay?
I think Bill's got another Tom Clancy question here. No, I heard on the Big Island, I don't know from whom, that they were going to put in another large cold water pipe.
Oh yeah, they're putting a 60-inch pipe right now. Yeah, they're putting a 60-inch pipe.
Oh, that's good news.
Yeah, well, that's very good news. It's not necessary news for an interesting reason. When you look at deep ocean water, everybody thought at the start, and myself included, that what you're going to do is make electricity out of it, or check electricity. And someday we will. Someday we will. But if I take enough deep ocean water to make 1 megawatt of electricity, OTEC electricity, I can with that, an alternate use is to get 10 megawatts of air conditioning or industrial cooling. So why do all these things with the intermediate of electricity when you can do them all without the intermediate of electricity? And that's what we do in our facility. And we end up eliminating the need for electricity, excepting in very, very minor amounts. We have no electrical pumps on our facility, not a single electrical pump. We do everything hydraulically, okay? The kind of things we do hydraulically is we make fresh water now in limited quantities. We don't need it very much, simply by having this big tower. And at the bottom of this tower, we have a siphon. Now, I'm an old Brooklyn boy, and I knew there was only one thing you ever use siphons for. What was that? Getting gasoline out of cars, okay? And I learned as an engineer that in the siphon, that goes up, that comes down, and you can't do anything with it once it's up, okay? You can't open up the valve or anything like that, okay? If sending cold. You can carry cold up and leave the cold up at the top. So we siphon cold up 30 feet. And there we play the hot vapors that we can generate a number of ways, whether from the air and everything else. And now we get fresh water at an elevation of 30 feet. And we have had no pump, no electricity, essentially almost no, as long as you have a little slope to go there, that you do it. So we make our fresh water in a way that's using energy or using power to speak of. And we do that with everything that we do. And so we have a complete environmentally sustainable facility with no electrical motors or powers and only hydraulic pressure that does everything. And we do it simply because we're doing it for the third world. You know, we air condition our trailer, not with the titanium heat exchanger or anything of that kind. We do it with an old Toyota truck radiator. And people told us, oh, that's the old Toyota truck radiator is going to corrode in a short period of time. Well, our old Toyota truck radiator doesn't know that because it hasn't corroded for 2 years, okay? And if it does corrode for 2 years, we'll get another one, the same way we got this one. As we went down to the junkyard, and we went to the radiator people and said, have you got a radiator which is so bad, in such horrible shape, that you'll give it to us, okay? And they said, of course. And so that's what we use. We use radiators that they throw away, and we air condition everything that way. Oh, we aren't going to do it when we'll go to the third world, except when we go to the third world, we will give them brand new automobile radiators. But an automobile radiator is one of the cheapest ways of getting a heat exchanger, as contrasted with giving them a one-of-a-kind titanium heat exchanger. So right now, this is what we're concentrating on, and you're all invited to come. But please come, okay? And we'll take the tour. And the only thing we ask is that you look over our stock of hats and T-shirts and buy a couple.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay.
Engineers and architects of Hawaii welcome your comment on this program and any of our recent programs. We encourage your direct participation in this community outreach. So please email us your comments and ideas at eahawaii@gmail.com.